who 2 years ago I had never heard of, was born in Southampton. His father was a member of the town board, Caleb Cooper. He was born in 1785. He marries Phoebe Sayre, which we'll have more to say about later, and he had 2, 4, 6 children. He was a saver. He basically, it looks like he saved every scrap of paper that came into his possession. The archives at Long Island Museum consist of letters, bills, profit and loss statements, and an enormous number of documents that indicate the production of whaleboats. We only have 3,900 documents there and 26 ledgers. We began cataloging these in August of 2014 and basically finished cataloging them last December. Since that time, we've been trying to do some analysis, and what I'm going to report here today is very much a preliminary account of some of the things that we have in this collection. It was purchased by Ward Melville in 1973, and so basically it sat for 40 years, or 41 years. From these documents, we now know that Cooper constructed between 1830 and 1858 954 boats. Okay, that's a lot, okay? As you can see, 700 of them, or almost 800 of them, were whale boats. He constructed fish boats that he called, and they were basically for the bunker industry. Now, the whale boats, as you've seen, are double-ended. The fish boats had a transom so that they could play out a net over the stern. And then he constructed a variety of other boats. Basically, some kind of an open boat, rowboats of various sorts. He even constructed some sailboats. But the two most characteristic boats in the collection are obviously his whaleboats and his fish boats. Now the question comes up as to what was the distribution of these boats. Now, the first thing I have to say is that we know from letters in the collection that Cooper was in Connecticut building boats in 1811. It's unclear exactly when he arrived in Sag Harbor. He is on the 1820 census, so we know he was there by 1820. My guess is that he probably was there shortly after the War of 1812 and was practicing his trade. Unfortunately, we have no records, real records, until 1830. So what we're looking at here with these 900 boats, almost 1,000 boats, may be half of what he built in his lifetime, which is, to me, is absolutely remarkable. The first question I had was, what was the distribution of these boats? And so I tallied up the boats, and we came up with a nice, neat bar graph in 5-year intervals. And I said to myself, this is too sanitary. Let's look at this on a yearly basis. And on a yearly basis, we get a completely different picture. The maximum that he produced between 1830 and 58 in 1 year was 75. Now, the production here, his really peak production, corresponds to basically the heyday of Sag Harbor whaling, 1843, 44, 45. In 1845, there was a disastrous fire in Sag Harbor that burned up most of the town, and this precipitous drop from 46 and 1846 and 7 probably corresponds to the economic condition in Sag Harbor at that time. But then, obviously, in the later 1840s and 50s, he continues to build boats. The interesting thing is that the fish boats, which you see here in yellow, kind of increase as he's going along. And the bunker industry was an enormous industry on the East End, fishing for menhaden, ultimately using it for fertilizer. And then he has the variety of other boats. Back here in 1838 and 39, he has another precipitous drop. And not being a historian, I would guess that that drop had to do with the financial panic in 1837. Money dried up. There's a letter from Jethro Coffin up in New Bedford that said that there was no money in circulation, in a letter in our collection. What's going on down here in the earlier 1830s needs more work. My inkling is that it has something to do with unstable economic conditions in the early 1830s. But when you look at this, you say, well, geez, he's building 75 boats here in 1830, and 31 he's down to 2. What's he doing in between here? And one of the major things that we see in his journals is he spends a good deal of time on the whale ships doing repair on the whale boats. So he's not unemployed. One of the questions that may come to your mind is, what was his workforce like? Well, you may not believe it, but it was he, 2 journeymen, and 2 apprentices. And this is in a letter that he wrote in 1843, which is at the peak of his production. A man wrote a letter to him asking for a job as a whaleboat builder and a position as an apprentice for his son, and he explained that he had a full staff, 2 journeymen and 2 apprentices. The apprentices, there was a senior and junior apprentice. It looks like from other records, other documents in the collection, that there was a junior apprentice that was probably 13 or 14. The senior apprentice probably was 15 or 16. So, to me, that's a remarkable production for 3 men and 2 kids, okay? Now, what I've chosen to do today is, rather than go through a litany of all the different documents, I picked out 2 that I want to spend some time with. This is the document. The way it appears, it's undated. And that's the first problem. It turns out that this guy is the clue. Luther Cook was the agent for a whale ship, the Hudson. This document was found mixed in with a whole series of mid-1840s documents. I think this one is dated from 1844. And if it is indeed dated from 1844, Cook was the agent for the Hudson. Cooper owned stock in the Hudson in 1842-34. So I think that's a reasonable supposition. 2 things. The Hudson sailed in August of 1842, came back in 1844, so it was gone 2 years. It came back with 2,400 barrels of whale oil and 23,000 pounds of whalebone, baleen. Okay, that's pretty good. One of the things that you should be aware of is that when tabulating the oil, excuse me, the records distinguish between whale oil, which was coming from the right whale, and sperm oil, which was much superior. So in 1844, if we're reading this correctly, the Hudson was not encountering sperm whales, but was concentrating on the right whales. Now, some questions struck me when looking at this document. The names of the individuals seems to be rather interesting, particularly when you get down in this group. You got Kellis, Cuffey, Rugg, Prince, and lo and behold, Farrell. Light goes on and says, maybe they're Native American. Okay? I also maybe guess is that we have more than that. Prince God may be Native American. Some of the people here today can attest to that. The other ones that I'm least sure of are the two Edwards. Now there are Edwards among Native Americans, but Edwards' family is pretty big on the East End. So that was the first problem. The second thing in looking at this is, what do these lines mean? Here and here. And in looking at it, obviously, this tally is the sum of these, and this tally is the sum of these, and so forth. So the question is, what does that mean? And I said to myself, I think they may be whaleboats, because whaleboats consisted of 5 crew members and a ship's officer. And if that's the case, that makes sense, because the normal complement of boats on a whale ship was 3. So, there was also a differential in pay. So now I'm in kind of fantasy land here. And I'm guessing that the highest paid member of these whaleboat crews was the harpooner. All right, that sounds somewhat reasonable. What about these 4 guys? Well, I'm going to go to Disney World now. Here's what I think here. I suspect that James Clark was the ship's cook. The 2 Paynes were carpenters. And this poor kid, who got $1.20 for 2 years' work, was a cabin boy. Okay? No way to verify it at the present time, but that's the way I'm looking at this. Now, the second document that I wanted to talk about this morning is a letter from 1806. And in 1806, Samuel Hunting, who was William's cousin, wrote him a letter from Southampton. And in the letter, first of all, the question here is, what's William Cooper doing in New York? Well, if we look at Catherine Street, it's right here. Corlear's Hook is right there. And this area of kind of south and southwest of Corlear's Hook was the center of the boat construction industry in New York in the late 18th, well into the 19th century.